my privilege to welcome you all on behalf of Vetstoria. So we started this particular initiative with the intention that helping our community out. So when we say the community, that includes the global community when it comes to webinars, but of course when it comes to in-person sessions, it's going to be the local community. But at this point, due to the condition, due to the situation that we all go through, we have decided to continue on a set of webinars. I hope that's a great news for all of you. So I have asked every one of you to answer one question for me. For those who just joined, this is the link. I would request every one of you to just put your answer for this. So the question is very straightforward, right? So I'm just asking you what the top challenge that you face in the planning space. So answer that for me. In the meantime, let me share the screen. While you are entering your answers into this, let me start reading some of them just to get a sense what kind of challenges we all go through day-to-day basis, right? The first card is fair estimates. Okay, I like the term fair. Why do you call it fair is a question, but you know that's an interesting idea, answer that you got. Estimation, definitely one of the biggest challenges because when we say estimations, we mostly trust hourly estimations. If we are not the ones to trust it, our stakeholders will demand on it, right? And also it's just lack of awareness, I would say, how exactly the estimation would work for agile teams. Being agile, we are still falling back on the traditional measures, traditional ways of working due to various reasons. So that's definitely a valid input. The third item is planning items that are huge features, absolutely. So this is one of the big problems that I see when I start coaching teams, right? Lack of structure put in place in terms of defining and refining the requirements is one of the root causes of why our estimations don't work, right? It's something like, think about yourself, right? So if you look at 12 months ahead, can you estimate anything accurately? I doubt. So the only thing that you can estimate would be an absolute clear, crystal clear goal or some event that's going to happen. So it's not going to change, right? So when there is level of uncertainty, complexity, and risk involved, there's no way you can get it precisely correct for a long time. So when the requirements are bigger, you increase the complexity, you increase the uncertainty, therefore increase the chance of missing your estimates, right? So that's definitely another problem. The fourth item is clarity on acceptance criteria. I love that because this is one of the very initial remedies I would suggest for teams. If you don't get enough clarity about your priorities and timelines, one thing is sure, you don't pay enough attention on the acceptance criteria, right? So we will get into those items gradually during the session. Unfamiliar domains or technical domains. Okay. Yeah. So when you are trying to estimate something that you're not familiar with, particularly the technical perspectives, it's not easy to plan, right? You can't give a prediction saying we will do this by this date with this quality, right? Spending this much of money, so it's impossible to plan and predict that way. Huge stories that needs to be broken down. So same point, agree. Not having a properly groomed product backlog, absolutely. So if your backlog is poorly groomed, That's a guaranteed way of failing and not being efficient in your planning, because that's the source of your requirements. That's the central place where everyone will look into. That's the central location that the team is basing their development efforts on, right? So if you don't have the backlog grown sufficiently, it's definitely way to fail as a team, right? Not able to effectively plan. Ad hoc high priority story planning in this sprint. At last moment of the sprint, yeah. So insertions, right? So when you talk about the sprint work, sprinting, one of the challenges we face is that insertions, right? There'll be a lot of ad hoc requests coming mid-sprint. Then what do you do about them? How do you balance out those ad hoc requests versus the commitments that you have already made and started working on? Is a big challenge. Not getting the proper estimation from team leads, and also team unable to work within the time boxing. Yeah. So estimation is one of the biggest challenges. We'll discuss the challenges around it, but I think, points taken, nothing that I could reject personally. So well done on it. So with that, let's start. Let's get it started, right? So it's going to be 1.5 hour discussion. We have spent some time here now, about 10 minutes. From here, what we are going to do is talk about few aspects, right? Number one, we are going to talk about certain conceptual aspects of agile planning. Now, when I started working with almost every team, I have worked in different sizes of organizations, including big global companies like HSBC, right, where my work was involved in multinational teams, trying to bring them together, plan, and then deliver. Also, different domains like banking, right? For in HSBC, it was mainly not so much financial applications, but kind of collaborative tools that the bank wanted. Then education at Pearson, I worked on educational software, so big teams, right? So, and then moved into scale-ups, right? So now I am at Vetstoria, where we are making kind of very good progress on what we do in the delivery perspective. So what we are trying to do here is basically to share mainly our Vetstoria story than anything else. But I'm gonna base my talk on some of the conceptual things that will add value to you understand. Because in some cases, if not all, lack of conceptual knowledge, understanding of the concepts and the theory behind what we are practicing is the root cause for the problems, not being able to be effective in what we do. So trying to understand what exactly it is meant to be, what exactly agile planning means is helpful. So we are going to discuss a bit on that. Then we are going to move on to some product planning concepts, right? So I'm going to brief you few key concepts that will definitely change your game, right? That will allow you to get on track, right? These are not silver bullets. These are not immediate, resolutions for the problems that you're facing. But these might be worth enough practices and concepts that can help your delivery practices. So my request is to think about them in that angle, see what and where we can adopt these concepts and practices that we are going to discuss within the session. Finally, I'm going to talk about a bit of sprint planning plus release planning. How do we get that right? Got it? So just to be clear, in terms of the outcome, you would be in a position to know certain planning practices and certain tips and tricks that will allow your teams, allow your organization to get better at your delivery and planning practices. It will not sometimes provide in-depth understanding, knowledge on each and every topic that we discuss because of the time constraint, right? But let me try my best to give the best value possible for the time spent here. Okay. So with that, let's. So this is what you basically answered. So thank you for that. So let's start here. The first point, the first thing that I want. Let me quickly check something before we started recording. That's so good. Okay. So let's talk about what a good plan is. Any thoughts? You can type in the comment chat window in the Google Meet. Tell me what is a good plan for you. So you see the answers, you see the points here. But what is a good plan for you, right? A good plan is something that supports reliable decision making. So this is a different perspective compared to what the PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge, prescribes as a good plan. So if you have worked in any traditional terms, right, traditional project environments, and if you have done any project management project planning, you will agree with me that traditional mindset is quite different to what I just stated here, right? Traditional project management planning is focusing on a single plan that is sealed, right? So you're going to plan something and you're going to seal it. So we call it sealed plan, right? It's going to be signed off by all the stakeholders and say, that's it, guys. So don't touch that plan yourself, right? So if you want to make any change, you need to get that approved by the approval board, right? That may involve a lot of stakeholders, at least few stakeholders, key stakeholders. With their consent, only it can change, right? So what this says is a totally different perspective. What it says is any good plan is a plan that supports reliable decision making. So this will not happen if you believe planning something, calling it a plan, and then sealing it. So we don't expect that to happen realistically in an agile setting. Right? There are many reasons to be discussed. So one example is this, right? Now, a stakeholder comes to you. Let's say you are a project manager, you are a lead, or you are a developer or a QA. A key stakeholder comes to you, happens to discuss something else with you, right? In the meantime, the stakeholder talks to you and asks, hey, Niro, so I know that you guys are working on this particular requirement, or you are to prioritize this requirement for the next sprint planning. When can you deliver this? Is the question. Now, what could be the right answer? Or how could you answer a question like that? So in many cases, we end up saying this takes this many number of days, right? We will say 5 days. We conclude the discussion there, right? Or we might say in this year, right? If I say, dear stakeholder, this will be done in this year, that's not a fair answer for you, right? Does that make sense? Not at all, right? That's not appropriate enough. That's not accurate enough for the person to understand what's going on. Or you might say, or I might say, dear stakeholder, we'll deliver it in December 2020. That is a better answer than the previous answer. Why? Because this is being a bit more specific and then telling the stakeholder that this will be done in this particular month. So at least the stakeholder knows it has to go through this month, November, and then December. But the problem is it 1st December or 31st December? Then there's a huge gap. What's the difference? 31 days, right? So your accuracy, estimate accuracy is 1 month. In the first case, it's many months. Now, since that, we are already towards the end of October, right? It's a 2-month gap. Its deviation is 2 months. It can be next week or it can be the last week of December. But in the second answer, the deviation is 1 month, 31 days. Third answer that I could give to the stakeholder would be, dear stakeholder, we will deliver it on 15th of December 2020. Stakeholder will be delighted to hear an answer like that, right? So this is accurate to the date. The accuracy level is a day, right? Day accuracy, 1 day accuracy. So that essentially means we can't miss that deadline. So if you make a promise to a stakeholder is going to go back to the sales team and say, hey, sales team, we are getting this particular feature delivered by 15 December. Let's go and announce good news, right? They all go and spread the news, possibly sell the product, come back and say, hey, the team, we have done our part, we have solved this, right? Now it's delivery, right? That is neither the right way of estimating. Because if you are estimating that, you have to be dead sure, you have to be absolutely sure that that is possible. If you have some uncertainty around your estimate, this is not the way you should give. Ideally, stakeholders wouldn't mind giving a range that is acceptable, right? Maybe 1 month range, 31 days of range is too much for them, right? That's a lot of money, a lot of effort, a lot of time to wait. But if you can get it to a weekly base accuracy, weekly accuracy, I think that's a good enough answer, right? If you say we will deliver this between the first week and the second week of December, that's a fair answer, right? Why I said it is a good answer, this is acceptable by most of the cases, and this is giving us the room to handle any uncertainty involved, right? So John Maynard Keynes said an interesting statement about this. He said, it's better to be roughly correct than precisely wrong. Interesting, isn't it? What does it mean? It's okay to be, it's good to be, it's better to be correct roughly. You don't have to be absolutely right. If you can get that answer, the estimate roughly right, roughly accurate, that is much better than being precisely wrong, right? You can proudly say, we will deliver it in 15 December, right? But if you fail to deliver it, it is a disaster. But if you say, roughly, we will deliver this by the first 2 weeks of December, that is a good enough answer. And then that's better to be there than just being wrong. Get what I'm saying? So that is what Agile believes in terms of what a good plan is. Okay. So if you have any questions, put them in the comment segment, right? I would like to pick them up at one point, but I would run through some of these things before we get there, right? So if you have any questions, please drop them there in the chat. So let's pick them during the Q&A. Okay, so that's that. Hope that makes sense. The next point that I want to bring up is what makes an plan in Agile. So if you want to call yourself Agile and you do Agile planning, what makes it Agile? Number one, Agile planning is more focused on planning than the plan, right? So there are a lot of colleagues from my team or the team I work for, organization I work for, right? So we observe that whatever we plan, it's not going to stay the same, right? So whether it's just 1 week or 2 weeks or even a single day, right? You can come up with the perfect plan that you believe that is going to work, but it's not going to stay too long, right? Your daily plan can be suddenly changed due to a very high critical bug that comes up. Your weekly priority can change by a different production issue. Your monthly, quarterly, yearly goals can change at any moment of time. So that is why Agile says plan, right? So planning is absolutely essential. But when you plan, focus on planning than the plan itself. Plan is important. You put down something, right? But that is subject to change. You need to trust that this can change at any moment of time. If it changes, you should be okay with it, right? So the same concept is explained through a few other terms. One, adaptive planning. Adaptation is a key for Agile. If you want to become Agile, you have to be adapted to the right conditions. Market, you need to understand the market demand. You need to understand what's going in the market, right? That's why you see when COVID crisis came up, every organization has had to adapt, right? Otherwise, they won't have survived, right? We had to change, right? Personally as well as professionally, right? As organizations, as individuals. So adaptive planning is another term to explain this. So you focus on planning and adapt your planning, adapt your plans at the right intervals, right? As at a frequency that you think is accurate enough. So you can review the things daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever works for you, right? When you realize that something has to be adjusted daily basis, then you've got to do that. Now, that is probably a decision or key input to decide what's your planning approach. Now, if you ask me, when should I use a Scrum? When should I use Kanban? When should I use some other approach? Probably the answer is that, right? So if you have to adjust yourself daily basis, don't think of a bi-weekly sprint and then coming up with a plan. It's not going to work because your priorities are changing daily. Then adopt something like Kanban, right? That supports continuous priority flow. It will allow you to continuously adjust your priorities and then look at the top highest priority. Got it? The second point is agile plans are not set in stone. They're designed to be flexible and encourage change. So whatever said and done, this is the most challenging thing to trust and adapt, right? Because when you say, okay, we are ready to change, we are ready to adjust our priorities, there are dependencies around it, right? So if you start working on something for 5 days, you have done a lot of work, right? A lot of money, effort, energy had gone into that work. So can you just throw away that and then work on something else? Is a tough decision. That's a tough call, right? So when we say this, we understand that some sufficient consideration needs to be done, sufficient planning has to be done before you start working on something. And when you start working on something, you shouldn't be just changing for sake of changing your plans, right? There has to be strategic decision. There has to be clear indicators why you make adjustments to your priority list. So that is why we say generally, when you start a sprint, let's say it's a 2-week sprint, we don't allow insertions, right? We don't want you to come and say, hey, do this. But providing it's a production bug that affects thousands of users in production will impact millions of dollars, you're not going to say no, right? Right? So you're going to say, yes, we understand the importance of this particular bug. We will fix it immediately. However, that's a collaborative decision that you need to make. That's a very tough decision that you have to make together with your stakeholders, right? So there has to be strict compliance how we do that, but at the same time we need to be flexible enough in changing and adjusting our plan. So that is what it is, right? So the longer the planning becomes, tougher it becomes for you to stay and stick into the plan. So this is very much varied individually, our personal perspective as well, right? If you recall yourself, before you got to know about these agility, agile concepts, probably you are someone who tried annual planning on the 31st of December for every year, right? Do you remember how long that plan lasted, right? Not more than a few weeks. In few weeks' time, that becomes obsolete. And most likely what happens is you never go back to that plan. You just work on ad hoc basis, right? So same thing can happen here, right? So we are flexible enough to adjust changes, accommodate the changes. Third one is not focused on BDAF instead of agile focuses on EDAF. So this is one of the best ways to understand it. BDAF stands for big design up front. EDAF is just enough design up front. Example, I want to launch a website. What is BDAF approach? You write a detailed requirement specification talking about every functional requirement, every non-functional requirement, put that into a document, call it a requirement spec. Get the sign off from the stakeholders, seal it and say, this is it, guys, don't touch it, just do it. If any change comes, let me check that. I basically hit that. So if getting back. Okay. So the BDAF approach is getting everything finalized, sealing the requirements and saying, let's go for it. No change requests accepted. It's kind of the approach, right? We say, if there's any big change request comes in, we are not really happy about it because things have been sealed, signed, budgets are finalized, so nothing much can change. If something comes up, what usually happens is it will go through a change request process, which takes weeks and months sometimes. And then, you kind of throw away everything that you have been doing for 3 months, 6 months, and then, try to adjust. It's tough, right? EDAF is looking at your big project goal, right? Launching your website is your big goal, right? You think about the mobile version, you think about the desktop version, you think about the performance optimization, you think about the accessibility, all of that. That is part of it. But EDAF is figuring out your immediate milestone that can hit the market. So in Agile, we also pay a lot of attention on time to market. Time to market is essentially one of the key game changers for businesses, right? Who wants to get to the business market faster than the competitors. So if you wait for everything to be done, you might spend 1 year, right? But if you look at the minimal viable set of features that you can release, that will allow you to get to the market in 2 months, right? However, when you compare this with your big goal, the completed website with accessibility, performance, mobile version, this is nowhere close to it. But at least you're going to capture some level of audience, right? Get in touch with them and say, hey, try this out. We will give it for a complimentary price. Or we will offer you this free beta version until this time window, right? You hook the audience with this approach. And what exactly just enough design upfront means is you don't neglect the design aspect. You keep provisioning to your bigger architecture. So you look at the minimal design spec, architectural spec that you have to start working on. Otherwise, what usually, this has happened in some of my previous projects also, right? So when you overlook on the architectural perspective, we start looking at, let's say, a plugin, right? So we build our application, the website on top of that plugin. By the time we chose the plugin, we did not have any major production bugs, but later we realized that the production bugs, there are production bugs. Now, let's say 2 months, 3 months down the line, we figure there's a production bug, right, in that plugin. So it's not supportive on certain browsers, but we still keep on developing on that. So after 1 year time, it might be a disaster. So it actually happened in one of my previous companies, where we actually use a plugin that is not supported anymore by one of the browsers. I can't remember the exact browser version. Then we reached out to the the authors or developers, founders of that particular plugin. They are saying no resolution, right? We somehow managed to come up with a workaround, but that's not the right way to go. So you need to look at and keep provisioning into your big design, but you don't have to design the complete architecture at the inception itself. It's not going to work also, right? Things will change. The final point is agile planning is spread throughout the project. So remember that. So it's not just one time, one-off planning where you're going to say, hey, done, no touching on the plan, right? We are saying, let's plan, let's continue to plan, let's keep planning, right? So we adjust our planning based on the conditions, the situations, the priority changes, the risks faced, all that, right? So that way, the team is not going to be blocked for delivering value. So we look at the highest valuable investment at one given point of time and try to deliver that. If something can't be done, something else will be done, right? And it is spread across multiple layers. So we'll get there, right? So the other thing is schedules are imperfect. I haven't seen a perfect schedule so far in my life journey, professionally as well as personally, right? Have you come across a perfect schedule? I highly doubt it. There's no something called a perfect schedule. In other words, you can't predict something for months and weeks and get that achieved as it is. 100% sure that things will change, certain changes will occur, right? These are some of the reasons. So users come up with new ideas daily basis. They change their mind, they change the priorities, they change their strategic goals. Therefore, they got to change what they are working on, right? Second, too many intangibles. If you look at, think of your team currently, right? Think about the last week. How many things that changed drastically? How many things that you couldn't figure out, right? How many things that you were not aware when you planned? So that's one reason why you can't come up with a perfect schedule. Third, developers have hard time in estimating. So it's not, when I say developers, it's the team, right? So it's QA and developers. So if I ask a developer how long this is gonna take, it's definitely gonna be a challenge, right? Because by the time we estimate, sometimes we overlook the requirement, we don't have enough details, we try to make early decisions, too early decisions. Also, we are not good estimating as humans, right? So we can't kind of say, I'll exactly achieve this by this date, this hour, this minute. It's humanly challenging, right? Team perspective is challenging, right? There are a lot of things that you have to consider for coming up with the right estimate. So if you can't perfectly predict a schedule, how can we predict what we can deliver is a question. So if you can't predict something accurately, how can you deliver something timely is the problem, right? So this is the problem that we are trying to solve as team. So we fail repeatedly because our focus is being getting the schedules perfect. That will never happen, right? What we ideally should try to do is to deliver the highest value possible at a given time window. So if you can get that sense feeling among the stakeholders, right? When I say feelings, maybe hearts, right? That is the way to go. So as long as they feel, okay, enough value is delivered, they're good enough, right? So the team is progressing well. But the moment they don't see timely releases, sufficient releases, frequent releases, they're going to freak out, right? So if you wait for 3 months and say, hey, the next release is also going to be delayed. So when will be the next one? 6 months ahead, ahead, right? Trust me, there are still organizations still working on this approach. I have worked for projects, waited for 1 year to go live, right? So these are big strategic software. In one instance, it was 1.5 years. I initiated the team. I started working on it that as a project manager, right? Scrum master. I left after 1.5 years. Even after another 6 months, 2 years down the line, I happened to talk to one of my colleagues and I asked, "Did you release that?" Not yet. They all kept working on something before the production, right? So still we do that. So that is not going to deliver value. That's not going to help your stakeholders, right? Because you don't deliver value. So your approach has to be coming up with the perfect, not the perfect schedule, but valuable, timely deliverables, so that they feel, okay, value is delivered, it's incremental. Okay, so how do we solve this problem in Agile is the question we have to answer. One, make decision based on what you know and do it often, right? So that is why, so if you look at the rationale behind the Agile planning, if you look at a framework, Agile framework like Scrum, I call it a framework because it's a set of practices. But Agile is not a framework. Agile is a mindset, right? So to achieve your mindset, there are a set of frameworks, set of practices grouped together and given to you. Scrum is one of them, one of those frameworks which will facilitate the Agile mindset. What it says is, if you work on these practices as per the prescription, you achieve the mindset intended. It's not the other way, right? It's not just trying to master the process. It's getting the right mindset adopted in our team setting. So do it often. That's why Scrum says have your sprint planning every 2 weeks time. If your sprint is 2 weeks, do daily discussions, right? Daily Scrum is a planning meeting. It's the most granular planning meeting that happens in a Scrum team. So you plan for the day. Now again, we misunderstand it. We think that it's an update call, it's a reporting call. We try to report something and make someone happy. No, it is a self-inspection to answer what is the plan for the day. So it's a team thing. No one else's cadence, right? So get that right. Second is, instead of making all decisions at once, we spread the decision making across the project. So if you look at a big 1 year release, you're not going to plan for the 1 year, right? You have a 1 year planning, of course. Then you have quarterly plannings. You have roadmap level plannings. You have epic level planning. You have sprint planning. Then you have daily planning, right? You spread the planning across the project life cycle. This is where the user stories come in. So we are not going to discuss a lot about user stories, but this is where the user stories are coming in, right? They will help you to understand what can be the smallest piece of requirement that can add value to the customers, and then we do it. Got it? So with that, so quickly, so this is one of the must adapt concepts if you have been agile, if you want to be agile. So I see that most of the teams stop here, right? I know that most of the teams, those teams will talk about the epics, but they don't understand the right rationale behind epics. They would consider this is as a simple grouping mechanism where stories are grouped, so no strategy behind epics, right? So this is how you can break down your big chunks of priorities into smaller user stories and then further into technical tasks. So where do we start? The biggest level of abstraction would be capabilities, right? So this is considering a product. But if you look at a company, it will go much above, right? Above capabilities, there will be strategic directions, strategic goals. I'm going to get to that shortly, right? But look at the product. If you are looking at a product, where you essentially start is at the level of capabilities. You would think, okay, what is the product? What are the capabilities that the product should have and must have? Think about that. You call it features or capabilities or initiatives, it doesn't matter, right? What you're thinking of is big features, big functionalities, big valuable deliverables that you're trying to release to the market. Then you talk about the epics. Epics is in weeks, whereas capabilities are months work. So an epic is a way of breaking down a big feature into smaller chunks of work that are weeks long. So ideally, every epic should last no more than just few weeks. Why? Because otherwise it's again becoming too big. So if you keep an epic open for 6 months, is the worst practice that you can have as an agile team. That essentially proves that you don't understand agile at all. Therefore, you are not agile, right? So if you don't understand how agile planning works, you really can't be agile, right? So what you try to do is try to get a process adapted, right? For that matter, you might go through a Scrum certification, know about the Scrum ceremonies, and you're trying to adapt those practices. No use. Will help you to get certain practices optimized, but nothing else, right? You're not going to deliver any value to your customers as per the expectation. So epics and then stories. Stories are days of work. So don't make your stories weeks long. How long? 60 to 70% of Scrum teams use bi-weekly, 2 weeks sprints. So in that case, how should, what is the biggest length of a story? 2 weeks. If you go beyond 2 weeks, that means you can't complete that story within a sprint. But that's the worst case scenario, right? My ask is make your stories days of work, few days. That means as you start the sprint, you can complete certain stories in few days time. Maybe the second day you have certain stories done. Third day you have few more stories done. Fourth day you have more stories done. So by the 6th, 7th, 8th and 10th day you are done, right? So that should be the target. So it's a challenging thing. At Vetstoria we try our best to get there, right? We are kind of transitioning and we are making good progress there. So our teams are quite smart in adapting these practices that way, right? So we kind of yes, face challenges, but trying to follow these guidelines so that we improve in these conceptual areas, right? Then what most of your teams won't do is slicing. So generally, you have stories, you stop there, correct? So sometimes estimating stories is challenging as well. What if you break it down into smaller tasks and try to estimate them? Right? In terms of estimation, I'm not talking about number of minutes or hours. I'm talking about overall bigness. How long would it take for us to do, right? Possibly it's in hours, so you can say within a day you can do these few tasks, right? Then tasks will be divided into, so tasks are basically slices. Slices can be further divided into smaller development commits. So if a developer can do a commit, right, that becomes a great way of breaking down the work. So that means, every few minutes of time you are going to make a commit and merge it to the master branch, and then that get integrated, right? So that way you ensure that your code is up to date. No conflicts as you would face, when you wait for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, etc. So conflict could happen within just few minutes, right? It's minimal. So that's that. So this is another thing that is overlooked by the teams. Checking the time. So we have around 40 minutes. Yeah, is that correct? Yes, 6:50. So I'll just talk about this, pause for a moment, ask your questions for maybe a few minutes. So this is something that's not understood by majority of the organizations that have ever worked. So Vetstoria has been great at this. The moment I joined, we started strategizing around the entire company strategy, so that our aims were not purely getting the agile planning. It was something, the vocabulary that we had, right, that we started talking about. Our vocabulary was basically how to create the right level of transparency within the organization. That is when the leadership, the stakeholders got together and agreed upon an approach. So, as Vetstoria, we adopted one of the entrepreneur operating systems. So, if you can note down, this might be useful for you, particularly if you are a mid-sized company, this is absolutely useful for you. If you are a big corporate, it's quite challenging to change everything. Uh, the model that we started adopting is called EOS, Entrepreneur Operating System. So this is based on a very famous, trending, now best-selling book in Amazon called Traction, TION, Traction. So this talks about certain management practices, planning practices that will help the mid-sized organization. So we pretty much adopted this without looking at this, right? What we said is, as the stakeholders leadership team, we got to do a bit of strategic planning. Think about the strategic level investments that we want to put our effort and energy on, right? Then we said we are going to do annual planning. So every year we are going to do a set of annual goals, agree on them, and then move ahead and break them down into smaller chunks, right? So beyond, below the annual strategy and strategic goals, then we said we are going to do quarterly goals. Every 3 months, 90 days time, we need to define our goals, right? For the next 90 days, what are the big 3 months goals that we are trying to achieve? So we identified that, right? So this is not just for the product development team, this is for all the teams, right? But if you look at the product perspective specifically, so you have product specific 90-day goals. Then you break that down into initiatives. So in this scaling, categorization, classification, it's capabilities, right? So portfolio level 90-day goals are further divided into product level initiatives. So there might be multiple products that we are working on. So each product will have its own backlog. These initiatives will go into those product backlogs. Correct? For one product, it's just one product backlog. But if it's multiple products that contribute towards one big portfolio, then it's multiple product backlogs, right? Then you have releases. So this is a very, very tricky thing. For us, most of us, the releases sit on top of sprints, right? We say release is basically multiple iterations. So this is one reason why some of the agile teams are not releasing often enough. They think you have to do few sprints of work to release something, right? Of course, that's the right scaling. But if you look at agile releases, we are thinking of smaller, more granular releases that will contribute towards bigger product level releases, right? Bigger launch level releases, right? But the releasing has to be much often within your agile delivery framework, right? We'll get to that shortly, right? So most of the time, what you see, what you are probably doing is working on the last 3 layers, most inner layers, 3 inner layers, right? Release planning, iteration planning, and daily planning. But trust me, in majority of the cases, it's just iteration and daily planning. No release planning being discussed. Of course, releases are planned, but no planning as such, right? You come up with a release plan just ad hoc basis, based on as if you feel, okay, let's release something. So if you want to be agile, you have to follow this structure organizationally, right? It's not just the development teams who should be good at it, who should do their planning. It is also above the team level who should adopt agile way of planning. So if your leadership is not understanding it, I can assure that you're not going to be agile. Only thing that you can do is within your sprint teams, scrum teams, or agile teams, you can get some of the practices adapted, right? You can say scrum and scrum ceremonies, these cadences. Perfect. That's it, right? So that's that, right? So before we jump further, I mean, go deeper, this is basically, let me do a pause here. So let me ask you maybe one or two questions. Do you have any questions? Let me check the chat window. Okay. Sushman, thanks for the question. Is a 90-day goal planning done every month, looking towards the next 90 days from the point? No, I mean, it can be structured the way you want, right? The high-level suggestion would be look at your 90-day goals, define and refine them quarterly basis. But it's adaptive. Remember, we are not going to seal them. Have a kind of a bi-weekly review, weekly review, just to look at the progress of them, see whether they are on track or off track. If they are off track, then come up with action items to get them back on track. Yeah, so that's kind of the direction there. The next question is also from Sushma. Is it done? Yeah, so you asked that question. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, Sushma. I'm okay to take one more question. So Soranda, thanks for sharing the entrepreneur operating system link. So everyone, so you have the link from my colleague Eranga. So you can have a look at it. It's quite useful thing. So you're confident that it's something that will definitely work if your company is mid-sized. Even a startup it would be a great tool because it's so easy to adapt it because you are small. If it's a mid-size, still it works. Try it out. Okay, so Karen, thanks for the question. Karen has a question. How will you share the, okay. So Karen, yes, I will share the slide deck. Thanks for the interest. Karen, do you have any questions since I brought up your name?
No questions.
So far, how is it for you? Is it valuable?
It's always good to get other people's insight.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for joining as well.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that's that. So let's move on. Quick time check. 6:58. We have 30 minutes. So let's see what we can cover. So the next thing. Some few concepts. Why I wanted to talk about this is these are some of the concepts that has personally helped me as an agile coach and a kind of a delivery professional, project management professional. Let's start here, the first one. So this is one of the things that you have to get right in terms of your planning. So if you think of one size stories, one size requirements, your planning is most likely will not be improved, or rather it's challenging for you to improve your planning practices because the effectiveness of your planning is also thoroughly dependent on how you break down your requirements, right? So think of this. You talk to your founders. Founders will talk to you about their big strategic goals. Then you understand their insights. Then come to senior management. You talk to senior management / mid-level management. You ask, okay, what are we trying to do? They will say, okay, we want to achieve this and that at a level of management goals, right? They won't essentially tell you what exactly you have to do. They will tell you in management perspective. As a team, we should achieve these things, right? Then you go to the roadmap level, portfolio, program level management. Maybe program managers are involved there. In an agile setting, you may have people like value stream engineers, value stream managers, process managers, product managers, etc., product owners, right? They will tell you, okay, we have this roadmap, we got to do this, right? So you listen to them, you create set of epics. Epics are just, titles. Then you look at that title of the given epic, try to break down the story into epic into multiple stories. You do that, right? And you end up having a backlog that you call good enough. Go to the planning, start planning. Plan, start sprinting. Now what happens? This is most likely what's happening in 60 to 70% of agile teams. So they overlook a lot of levels, particularly starting from the capability level to the epic level. They don't try to understand what exactly this capability means. They don't try to understand what exactly this epic means, right? So if you don't understand the epic enough, you have no way of coming up with the right level of breakdown. So story slicing has to be done vertically. Requirement breakdown should be done vertically. Again, this is a malpractice. When I say this, not doing or not following vertical slicing. If you want to look at your agile maturity, this has to be a measure. Are you breaking down your requirements vertically? What a vertical breakdown, what a vertical requirement is, a requirement that delivers a value that is meaningful, that is releasable, that is viable. Example, I'm doing let's say website. So I have an epic called user authentication should be completed using single sign-on. And if this is a vertical story, my way of breaking down that capability slash initiative into multiple epics should be such a way each epic delivers some value to the customer. So if you are not in a position to go to the market and say, hey, something is ready for you, that's not a vertical story. That's not a vertical epic. So if you can break down your epics such a way, you deliver some value, it can be the bare minimal value delivered. That is the ideal way to do it. That's the right way to do it. So remember that. Second thing is, we mostly overlook the value curve, right? What the value curve means is, in delivering user authentication using single sign-on, being agile, we are not trying to deliver the bulk feature at once. We are going to deliver a set of increments such a way we increment the value delivery in a regular time interval basis, right? Maybe weekly basis, maybe bi-weekly basis. So every week you have something out, something released to production that is ready to use. So if you are not in a position to release something to production weekly, group them in the staging. Once something is ready to use, release that into the production, right? However, your breakdown, your planning should be done such a way you deliver incremental value. So this is the ideal value curve for agile teams. Not this, not this. This is waterfall, right? You wait 3 months, deliver something. This is mini waterfall. This is what is mostly happening in Scrum teams, agile teams. You have a sprint. You have zero delivery within the sprint, that is 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, you deliver something. So that is this. You wait another 2 weeks, deliver something else. You will not wait another 2 weeks, like so on, right? So you deliver some sort of incremental value, but that's not the optimal increment that you can achieve. So if you're agile, your value increment is pretty much gradual, forms a curve, right? And so this is something we adopted at Vetstoria, and our stakeholders kind of like it. They really like it. They also understand what we are trying to communicate in terms of our delivery schedule. delivery planning with this, right? Because the most scariest thing to tell stakeholders is, hey, we will take 3 months to deliver this, right? We will take months to deliver something. In this way, we are conveying our plan in such a way we show them the incremental value proposition, value increment, right? So our ideal value delivery perspective here, right? This is when we say that is a complete feature. So I take an example of a website launch, and then I say MVP, right? So MVP is kind of a beta version, right? Then I go here, the next value delivery point is MVP 1.0. So now I go from beta to rolling out to APAC, Asia Pacific region. Then I go global. The next value delivery point is expanding our visibility in other regions, right? Then so far we haven't spoken about mobile version at all. This is just the desktop version. Make sense? Now, the next our delivery target, value delivery target is mobile MVP. That is also an MVP, minimal viable product, not the complete version. Then I talk about MVP 1.0 mobile. That might be the most optimized mobile version. Then I talk about the performance optimization. Then I talk about the payment plans. So far, we had not integrated a payment gateway. Now we want to integrate a set of payment gateways, right? Maybe we had third-party increments, third-party gateways, right? Payment mechanisms. Finally, final of improvements. Does this make sense? So any one of you do this? Any one of you follow a similar approach to show you a value delivery approach and the milestones, right? If you don't do that, you have to get that right. So otherwise, what you are essentially saying is you talk about one thing at a time and don't communicate the complete picture. That way, stakeholders struggle to understand when and how you're going to deliver the complete value, right? So this is one of the questions that stakeholders have when we say, hey, we have an MVP. They ask, okay, what's the point in? This does not capture the total audience, right? This does not capture the key clients. How can an MVP be useful? Then you say this is how, right? Based on the energy, effort, money, the timeline, this is how we are going to deliver it, right? So if you look at, if you are familiar with LinkedIn, LinkedIn Live, do you know LinkedIn Live got the highest traction compared to Facebook Live? But if you look at the two implementation, Facebook Live is their own feature. Now it's one company, right? But LinkedIn Live is launched with third-party streaming tools. They don't have the streaming capability internally. What they did was they affiliated, they connected with few good scalable streaming platforms and said, hey, if you want to go live through LinkedIn Live, use one of these providers. Yeah, it's one of the trending live video platforms. So it's the same thing, right? So they may have their value curve form. What we see is one delivery point, right? One level of value delivery. Okay. So with that, one more thing: MVP and MRF. MVP is basically a minimal viable product that ensures that minimal value delivered to the users. So if you can consider, okay, this is the bare minimal version that the users would expect, that is an MVP. So you can structure around that and say this is our MVP delivery. These are the features, these are the exclusions, these are the things that we kind of keep or defer for the next version. So there's another associated concept called minimal releasable features, right? Minimally viable feature is something goes to the customers, making that is useful for them. Minimal releasable feature could be something that is ready to release, but not so useful so far, right? However, when users see this as a beta, they feel like, okay, this is a valuable investment. Let me buy this. Let me sign up for the upgraded version, next version. So this is a useful concept for you to adopt if you want to go to the market and see how the traction is, how is it being accepted by the community. Yeah. So that's that. The next thing is the prioritization. It is a must. When you're planning, one of the challenges you face is doing the prioritization effectively. So it's a different topic altogether, right? So we can talk hours on that. But generally, there are different prioritization techniques that you can involve. One is Moscow. That's the most simplistic, useful tool that I have come across. I have been using it almost in every organization I work for. In addition to that, there are a few other models like Kano model. Then we have weighted scoring model. We have RICE model, right? So there are a few other models. So it's up to you to decide what prioritization model that you use. So recently, Vetstoria, we adopted weighted scoring model on top of Moscow. So we use Moscow, but we complement Moscow prioritization through set of weighted indicators, right? Weighted scoring. So here it allows you to figure out the priorities, scoring the indicators. Like one indicator would be, it can be decided by you. There's no hard and fast rule. So the indicators we would recommend are number one, the value delivered, customer value. Second, the impact. What is the impact you do? Then the risk. What is the risk involved? Right? It could be another useful thing. Then the cost. How much cost you have to spend on this? Right? So this will also allow you to figure out high valuable investments, high impactful investments with bigger efforts and higher risks. Let's say it needs 1 year involvement and it is the highest risky item. Would you pick it as the top priority? I doubt, because you have to wait 1 year to deliver the value. You have to tackle a lot of unknown risks to deliver that as well. So there might be few other priorities that are high value, low risk. So this allows you to kind of balance between these indicators and say, okay, this is our priority list. So again, it's a collaborative decision you are going to make together with your clients and stakeholders, right? So your planning should be focused around value delivered, then identify chunks of functionality to release incrementally. Remember that. So you can call yourself incremental. You are delivering well, incrementally, picking certain functionalities without delivering any value, zero value to the client. Yeah, that's not useful, right? So when you prioritize, you have to pick up the value delivered. Okay, so again, you have to define what you mean by value. So when I interviewed one of the value stream consultants from America a few years ago, you can look into my YouTube channel and it's there like 30 minutes interview. The first question I asked is, can you define the term value? What she said is, her name is Karen Martin, right? She's the author of Value Stream Mapping, famous book. What she said is interesting. She said, value is few things together. Number one, what do the customers want? So if you can deliver something what the customers want, that is value. Second, what will make their experience smoother, benefit them? That's not a need, right? But that is something that is adding some benefit to them. So look at Amazon, that's what they do, right? So they come up with like the most edge cases, right? Edge case scenarios to help the users, like recommending books others bought when they bought the book that you picked, right? Uh, that's one. So why? Because it's something that can add value to them. It's not something they want. It's something that can add value to them. So that's the second aspect. The third aspect that she mentioned is interesting. There's an emotional perspective to the value that you deliver. So you can deliver the best possible feature, but if the users are not happy about it, you haven't figured the right definition for the value. So it's also the emotions. It's the feeling that I get when I work on a product. It's the feeling that I get when I make use of a particular software, right? So you have to get that right. So prioritization is another thing that you have to get right. So the next thing is, so I'm going to quickly run through this, not much talk here. So agile ways of planning is primarily on two approaches that I have seen so far. One is story points. Second is ideal days, right? So this is basically this content is influenced by one of my mentors, Mike Kwan, who is one of the credible agilist and agile trainers in the world. So basing what he says, I'm just talking to you on this, right? So it's proven to work and it's proven to be the right thing as well that way. So one technique that is used by agile teams is story points. Second way is ideal days. Story points is a relative way of estimating. Ideal days is an ideal way of estimating. So that means we consider ideal days. What is an ideal day for you as a team? If you are not being distracted, if you are 100% available for the work, if you really have everything that you need to do the work, that's an ideal day. That's not a practical day, right? Your practical day is sounding like not even 50% of my time can be allocated here. I don't know what's going to come into my plate. If a production bug comes, I have to pick that. I don't know whether I have everything that I have to have in order to work on something, right? So ideal day is just to figure out the time or the effort, the bigness of a particular delivery story, so that you can figure, okay, if I spend my ideal days, this is the effort that is needed. Got it? When you are being distracted, then you are trying to kind of buffer and you are trying to keep some room for that set of distractions and estimate, come up with a delivery schedule, delivery planning. Story points is relative. So I'm going to say, okay, to implement a login screen, it took this much time, effort. Therefore, how much time I should spend in implementing a search feature? How much time should I spend implementing SSO, single sign-on? How much time I spent on implementing a big payment gateway implementation, something like that, right? So you're gonna relate your estimation with something that you are knowing of, that you know. So the traditional way, not to talk much, but you know when you are a traditional team, we used to estimate the lines of code, right? We said, okay, how many lines? I'm not sure any one of you were there, but I have worked in some of those teams who trusted line of code is a great measure. So he said 1,000 lines, okay, it takes 1 week. If it's 100 lines, maybe just few hours, something like that, right? Functional points. How many functional points that we are trying to deliver? So I think most of you would have been here. How many of you estimated for web pages, website? How many web pages? 1 day per page, 10 pages, 10 days, right? Easy, but it's not going to work, right? So that's not the right, most effective way. Okay, so story points, of course, is useful way of doing that. But when you are doing that, remember you need to understand it really well. Otherwise, you're gonna spend a lot of time estimating, but not being so productive and useful. Right? It's a relative way. So they help to derive at your delivery timelines. So it's a way of estimating the bigness than the exact effort. So I can say this story is bigger than this one. This is two times as big as this particular story, right? So it's a relative way of saying. And the story points don't decay, right? So no unit attached, therefore they're not going to decay. Story points are a pure measure of size. Estimating story points is typically faster. So this is how generally it works. So you're going to estimate the sizing. You look at each and every story in your backlog. You're going to estimate the bigness of it. Then do a calculation basing how much the team can handle in a given sprint, given time box. Example. So this example is basically about carrying 300 kg of sand. Providing in one round you can just carry 20 kilos. How many rounds you have to take in order to carry the entire sand block, right? 300 kg. So then what you do is you divide 300 by 20 and then say it takes 15 rounds. So I have to go 15 rounds to carry 300 kg of sand from this place to another place. So this is the same thing that we try to do in story points based estimations, right? So I'm not going to discuss a lot here, but when you're estimating, remember what you estimate using story points is the bigness, nothing else. How big something is compared to another thing. So you look at the complexity, uncertainty. That is one thing. My con says uncertainty as well. Also, other the veterans in the industry says, okay, look at the bigness, look at the complexity, look at the uncertainty. That is a risk involved, right? However, you don't estimate the complexity or uncertainty or the risk. So one of the myths that I hear a lot is let's estimate the uncertainty. You can't estimate uncertainty or the complexity. However, how big a particular task is influenced by complexity, uncertainty, risk, the volume of work, etc. Right? The size, the bigness is influenced by that, not the other way around. So, example, going from one place to another by walking, by a bicycle, right? Driving a car, or flying is different complexities, right? So it's not just the bigness; it's also other influential factors like how complex the task is, how complex the method that I'm using to travel from here to another location in the country, right? So that's exactly what we are trying to do here. So also do this, right? Triangulate, triangulate the estimates. That essentially means, so example, if you estimate this one, right? So we will start establish a benchmark. We will say this is a 5 out of 100. If it is 5, then our next question is, if the optional wood deck is 5, what's the size of this in terms of the construction, right? So comparing the previous slot, we are trying to estimate this slot. Then what do we estimate is also contributing towards it, right? Is it the effort? Is it just the floor size? Is it the construction that we are trying to do? Is it the budget? So everything depends on the context, right? What are you trying to estimate? Then finally, I just want you to introduce, I want to introduce two approaches. Number one, when you do sprint planning, I'll tell you what I prefer, but there are two planning approaches around agile teams. One is velocity-driven planning. So I hear that some teams may look at their velocity. Velocity is the pace which you can deliver something as a team. So within a 1 week time box, what is the value that we can deliver is kind of the question we are asking. So we have a measure in story points. So if you have a velocity established, then you are going to say, okay, our so possibly this one, right? So I'm going to just get here. So no, so I'll stick to this actually, right? So otherwise time is not enough for us to discuss everything. So velocity is, let's say, 50 per week per team, and you have to deliver 300 story points. So then what you do is 300 divided by 50, and then say this will take 6 weeks, right? However, if you say this, we delivered 50 story points last time, let's deliver 50 points this time. This is a very unreliable way of estimating for the short term, because you are thinking of 1 week time, then trying to say, okay, what we delivered within 1 week is 50 points. Therefore, in the next week, we will deliver another 50 points. This is not going to work, because velocity, right, what we can deliver within a week is highly dependent on the nature of the work and then the kind of the other dynamics, right? But if you look at 1 year, right, the team has been doing multiple sprints, many sprints, weekly sprints, bi-weekly sprints for that year. Now you look at everything and then try to say, okay, on average, right? So this is basically what we say. Our best is this, right? Our last 8 sprints, we delivered this. The worst is this. Now you try to establish a benchmark using this historic data, right? So then you can say, okay, our velocity is kind of the average here, right? Not the best, not the highest, but the mean, right? Let's say 33. So in that case, it makes sense for us to say delivered in 33, then 37 and 28 is the right measure. So you use that for your planning. So this is velocity-driven planning is useful when you have done at least few sprints. Don't look at just one sprint and make decisions. Look at your 5-6 sprints done previously, try to establish a benchmark velocity, then try to plan. So that is mostly correct, right? The next thing is commitment-driven planning. That's the last thing that I'm going to discuss for the day. Commitment-driven planning is what I basically prefer in most of the cases. I also work on velocity-driven planning when we are matured as agile teams. When we have matured enough in terms of knowing our velocity and kind of understand the conceptual perspective, right? So commitment-driven planning is discussing the highest priorities in your backlog and asking the question from the team, hey team, what do you think about this particular priority? Do you think you can deliver it? Then you look at all the dynamics, all the uncertainties, the risks, effort, everything that you have to consider as a team, and then make a call. Looks like we can try this. Let's try this. Go for it, try it. If it works, works. If it doesn't, then we adjust, right? So in the planning, if you think of it, the team says, so no, this is not possible to deliver this, then we look at the next smallest story and ask, okay, can we deliver this story then, right? So you have 33, let's say, story points of velocity. And then now say, okay, let's start prioritizing, taking stories from backlog and dropping them into your sprint backlog. And say, let's do this. Then look at another thing. So let's say you have 10 story points left. Look at one story. The story point, this particular story effort is 5, or let's say 8, right? Then what do? Take that, prioritize it, put that to the screen. Now, how much left? 2. Do you want to fill that? Questionable. You might try to fill it by maybe a minor story, a small effort, but you can leave that as it is as well. So no harm just leaving those two story points, just giving some room, right? It's not trying to be precise figure. It's trying to be roughly accurate, so that we focus on delivering value than delivering anything else, delivering the functional deliverables, right? Delivering, sort of, you can call it, you deliver 300 story points. it has no meaning to the stakeholders. It will only tell you something, okay, we are delivering something. What are we delivering is a question we need to looking at the exact value, that the final value being delivered to the team. So that's with the timing. We don't want to take further time from you guys. That's all we can offer for the day. So I know, I had a few other slides planned, but this is a slide deck from a bigger training that I will share with you. So I'm going to share the entire slide deck with all of you so that you probably can understand the rest of the content. So if you do have any contents, watch for our upcoming seminars, webinars, and meetups in case we get back to our office space. So thanks for joining. So before we wrap up, I would like to ask you one more question. So I'm gonna just put one more link to you guys. So if you can answer this question, it's just a quick question. Also, you can speak up at the same time, right? If you are ready to speak up and say, okay, this is what it is, do that as well. So here is the link. So I want you to answer one question. Let me actually share the screen. So you're going to spend maybe 8 minutes, not so much, but maybe five to 7 minutes. So this is the question I asked from all of you. So the limited scope that we discussed within 90 minutes, tell us what you learned, the top learning you personally, right? What was your top learning? What was the thing that you learned newly? What was the thing that you learned that you think you can take into your team and start practicing? So representing Vetstoria, I would like to know that, because our aim is to deliver something valuable to all of you. Kind of show our insight, kind of give the pointers for you from the practices that we adapt internally. So we actually brought up some of the key practices, key beliefs that we started adapting that seem to work very well, right? So okay, so anyone who wants to speak up and tell me, okay, this is something that I really appreciate among the things that I learned. This is the top learning that I learned. Anyone? Any volunteers?
Hi, Nimesh. Yeah, just
Hi, Lahir.
hi. Just want to say about the commitment-driven planning. I think all that was a good thing.
Right.
In the previous companies that I've worked for, I've been there as well for some time, I think.
Right.
So yeah, so in that company, there was a different perspective. So it's interesting what you say about commitment-driven planning. So we were very good at that time before you joined. I've been in a different time in the company. We have an overlap.
Yeah.
So the management thinking was so we did velocity-driven planning, and like you said, just discussed in the other slide that you said. But so even if we delivered, like, let's say 300 points or whatever points consistent so what's the point, right? So that's a different thinking I came across now, because we used to hit the targets, maybe better it also sometimes, and take credit, take pride for that, and that was the setup in that company. Management was always will look for that metrics, how much is the team achieving, or how much are the teams in a particular program or a portfolio achieving, and even the stakeholders, it will be presented to stakeholders also. So we used to do value-driven planning religiously, and we were good at it as well, but it's a different perspective, commitment-driven also, and the challenging question that you asked, okay, we deliver value, what's in it? Right?
Yeah.
Perspective, I raise my
okay
thoughts.
Perfect, Lahir. Thanks for your feedback. Appreciate it. Yeah. So at the moment, what one practice we adapted is that, right, commitment-driven planning kind of. So we look at the velocity, of course, right? But we are not trying to make our decisions based on the velocity. What we, in fact, look at is the list of priorities and then see what we can release next. So for that matter, Rahiru, we have started adapting weekly releases, right? So we have planned weekly releases. So we have a kind of a release train, let's say. We are trying to kind of get those weekly releases happening in any case, right? Then, you know, in the planning, what we do is we try to have that discussion, commitment-driven planning discussion, and pick the stories for those weekly releases, and then try to hit that. So if we fail to hit something, then we kind of adjust our plan. Then try to deliver something that is possible to deliver. Got it?
Okay. Do you maintain any metrics also? I mean, because I'm very well aware of how we ran that velocity. We made metrics, but commitment, even I don't know whether you can make any sense of metrics or whether there's a need to do that, because in my experience, that's all we were pushed to the targets and then management stakeholders also.
Yeah.
So it's a different thinking, I think.
Yeah, so there can be different metrics, right? So some of the metrics that we kind of established recently, one is number of production bugs, right? So if you produce production bugs, no point releasing as often as possible, right? So getting that under control is a key measure. Then failed deployments, right? So if you are failing constantly on the deployments, that's another measure. The measures are mainly to do with having constant discussion with the stakeholders, understanding their feedback. So another measure that I can suggest we agreed to implement is Net Promoter Score. So that is if you ask the customers how likely you are going to promote our product, give them a range, right? Minus 100 to 100 or 1 to 10. So this gives you a very great insight. Yeah. So this reflects on how quality the value we deliver as well. So these are some of the measures. See, one of the other stretch measures for you to adapt if you want to stretch a bit is zero bugs policy. So we are not yet there. So we are trying to get there somewhere. But we have put down our bugs count drastically low, right? So that we get closer to that. So if you can maintain zero bugs backlog, that means you are efficient. You have been delivering absolutely great value. So some teams do that. It's an extreme practice measure coming from XP. Yeah. So maybe we can touch base further, Lahiro. So good questions. Yeah. So maybe offline, let's continue the discussion. So okay, so I got 2 points here. What a good plan is. Okay, yes, this is mostly overlooked, and we are confused about a good plan mostly. The next thing is planning about epics beyond each sprint level, such as 90-day plan. Yeah, so it's definitely, I can tell you these are must have practices in your organization, right? So focus beyond the team level, try to get that transparency, try to have that discussion with your stakeholders and clients, ensure that what you do daily basis is pretty much in line with your strategic goals. That will ensure you are being efficient as an organization, efficient as an agile team. So that's all for the day. Thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate your time. Representing Vetstoria, big thank to you for being here. Believing that there's some value in it, and then sticking to the entire webinar and staying with us. So we'll see you in another webinar. Until then, take care. Have a great evening ahead, and some of you great day ahead. Cheers.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Niro.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for the session.
Yeah. Cool. Cheers.
Thank you, Nino.
Yes. Hi, Ravi. Thanks for joining.
I,
I just figured you are in, so thanks for being here.
Thank you, Nino.
All right. All right. Great. Thanks for the feedback. Cheers.